Change? Copyright 2023. Chapter 1. The lead defense attorney turned to the jury, waited a few moments for effect, and announced, "The holographic presentation you are about to see, wait. Don't let me influence your interpretation of this presentation with any more of my words. Let's see it." Lighting dimmed, and an overwhelming visual presence appeared about 5 feet off the floor in the area between the judge's presiding throne and the respective counsel's tables. The three-dimensional holographic presentation and accompanying audio began with people screaming and fleeing, others pursuing and firing automatic weapons at those fleeing. Detail and rendering were horrifyingly exquisite. Blood seemed to explode from the fleeing victims. Broad blade machetes sliced and diced some of the pursued victims. Jurists, and most of the defending and all of the prosecuting legal counsel teams, the defendants, and people in the front rows of the courtroom, ducked in anticipation of receiving a bloody baptism. However, true to the holographic medium, the blood only impacts visual senses while stimulating maximum emotional responses. The holographic presentation was the opposite of the facts for the case under consideration. Most glaringly apparent was that in the holographic presentation, the roles of perpetrators and victims were reversed. The prosecutor's team attorneys jumped to their feet. The lead prosecuting attorney repeatedly screamed, "Objection! Objection!" The technical crew stifled the holographic presentation and returned ambient lighting to normal. Some members of the jury, and several members in the public spectator seating area were succumbing to nausea and losing their breakfast. Ben, a key witness for the prosecution, remained silent, but incessantly shook his head side to side in a condemning no response to the grossly deceiving holographic presentation that portrayed both him and his wife as perpetrators instead of victims of the bloodbath. The rush of adrenaline impaled Ben's senses. A hot, prickly sensation was sweeping over his body. The judge was standing, banging her gavel, repeatedly yelling, "Order! Order in the court," as the sweat poured down her pudgy face. Finally, most of those in attendance began to take their seats, and noise declined as the courtroom descended toward calm. The judge, still standing, still perspiring, boomed emphatically, "Counsel to my chambers." When prosecuting and defense teams and the judge returned to the courtroom, the judge appeared to be as anger-infused as ever. Without further explanation, she announced, "Court adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning." The judge scowled at the defense attorney team, then exited to her chambers. Chapter 2. Next day, Jennifer waited for her turn to testify in what she and Ben had come to refer to as Hotel 22. It was the area designated as the Witness Protection Program, WPP, holding chambers somewhere in the matrix of the multi-floored mega courthouse. A couple hours earlier, security personnel had escorted Ben from Hotel 22 to the randomly assigned courtroom of the day for his participation as a key witness for the prosecution of Numbers 1 and 2 of the GTO International Crime Syndicate. 12 agents of WPP and other law enforcement agencies secured Hotel 22 and assured that Jennifer's every need was efficiently addressed as she waited her turn to be escorted to the courtroom and testify. Jennifer decided to try to do the seemingly impossible, to let her thoughts melt away from fretting about her turn to testify this afternoon, but more likely tomorrow for the prosecution. She began to coach herself for the future beyond doing the right thing, in accordance with directives received during so many of her and Ben's WPP briefings. Change? Change everything about you. That's the path to a new. The main WPP chamber entry light began to flash red. Jennifer and her attending agents' attention were all drawn to the door beneath the flashing red light. Someone was entering. No one had called ahead per protocol. What's happening? Jennifer internally silently asked herself, noticing her own immediate onset of underarm perspiration and accelerating heart rate. A mass of agents stormed into the WPP holding chambers, Jennifer's husband Ben being rushed along in their midst. "Let's go," Gary, the top WPP witness agent commanded, as he continued toward the other entry exit at the back of the WPP holding chambers. This had never happened during previous days of the trial. Jennifer rushed to Ben's side with questioning eyes and asked, "What's happening?" Before Ben could attempt to answer her question, Gary's voice again boomed. "Let's go. Move it." Gary ushered one and two at a time through the entry-exit door at the opposite side of the room from which they had just entered. The door opened into a wide, well-lit underground 2-plus-lane street that offered passage to the right and to the left. This was at least one floor below the Judiciary underground parking lot. Gary ordered everyone to follow him to the left. The rushing group passed two unmarked doors on their left. The implied escapism heightened the adrenaline release in Ben and Jennifer. Sweat poured. Unanswered questions darted in and out of their thoughts about the unknowns of the moment. A heavy thud noise boomed from seemingly all sides and above. The running group slowed to a stop as 5 similar thuds seemed to come from all directions through the floor, walls, and ceiling around them. The lights flickered but soon stabilized to light. A few cracks in the floor, walls, and ceiling appeared with subsequent tremors. The tunnel lighting flickered off again, but returned within a few seconds. "Come!" Gary screamed. "Run!" Others echoed his words as all complied. Less than 20 strides brought them to another door. Gary presented himself with palms out, eyes forward for the biometric key reading process. A green ID confirmation light lit up, but the door didn't open. Gary continued to present himself for key reading. The door still did not open. Other handlers alternately rammed and pulled the door. No change. Sweat seemed to pour off Gary. "Come," he commanded, and raced off in the direction from which they had come, running at an even faster pace. As they passed the first of the previously passed unmarked doors, another handler called out, "Try this one." Gary countered without looking back as he raced ahead, "I'm not registered with that one." All followed as Gary continued running. No one noticed damage worse than floor, wall, and ceiling cracks. The group passed one unmarked door, and soon came to the door to the WPP holding chambers. In spite of Gary's proper biometric presentation, the door to the WPP holding chambers wouldn't allow re-entry. Gary shouted, "Come." He led the group in the same direction. "Come." Gary repeatedly urged the group along. They passed another unmarked door. Gary presented himself for biometric reading at the next unmarked door. It opened. "Yes." Gary boomed. "Let's go." They entered and immediately began climbing stairs. Readily noticeable cracks in walls and ceiling, and dust in the air strongly hinted of things to come. Up 2 flights of stairs brought them to another door. Gary swiped plastic to unlock this door. The green light lit up. Gary opened the door. Clouds of dust exited the doorway and surrounded them. Coughs and partial hand covering of the eyes slowed the group's progress. "No talking. Try to be as quiet as possible. Let's go," Gary said, this time softly as he headed out along the hallway to the right. He knew his chosen direction would bring them closer to their backup ground transportation. He also suspected it took them toward the more severely damaged areas of the explosions they had heard. Gary continued his directives. "If the dust gets so thick we can't see, feel your way along the left wall. I'll call out softly now and then as we go along. Follow me as quickly as you can. This way," Gary repeated as they moved along, stepping over chunks of debris. "Keep coming," Gary encouraged the fleeing entourage. They continued in a cautious rush amid the dusty visual barrier. Things got worse as they moved along. It was so dusty that no one was sure whether the ghostly impression that the entire side of the building was demolished was true or not. Portions of the interior had been reduced to varying sizes of chunks of cement, many of which had rebar protruding from them at different angles. Though the explosions had subsided, the chaotic mess was still a landmine of injury potential for anyone in its midst. What was the structural integrity of the building? Would upper floors or parts of them soon come tumbling down? Come, Gary commanded, as he continued to climb over the disarray that had once been the epitome of structures designed to imply a forever existence. Bodies and body parts were strewn along both sides of the zigzag progress was leading. Nausea began to overwhelm and slow Ben and Jennifer. At least 3 of the security team members faltered on all fours, vomiting amid the devastation. People hoping to help rescue survivors were entering the building area and climbing over the rubble. Sometimes it was possible to see them amid the dust. At other times they could not be seen, but they could be heard yelling for those in need of help to call out or raise a hand. Gary repeatedly called out remarkably softly, considering the gross nature of the damage, "Come?" His words were as much his own personal effort to overcome his own nausea, lethargy and loss of focus, as it was a directive to the rest of the group. Ben knew what Jennifer did not know. The chaotic scene over which they stumbled was the randomly designated courtroom in which he had completed testimony only moments before. It was where both their families, direct and extended, had come to show their support. "Jennifer, don't look down," Ben called to her, as he continued to climb over the exploded, dismembered terrain in attempts to follow Gary. Jennifer tried to comply with Ben's command. Even so, unavoidably, Jennifer looked down to visually negotiate the unpredictable footing. She was about to put her hand on just one more piece of rubble, when she noticed her sister staring up lifelessly from her blood-smeared face. Jennifer began screaming and crying as she fell to her sister. Gary climbed back toward Jennifer. Ben was turning toward Jennifer when he saw his mother. Actually, it was only his mother's head. Ben no longer heard Jennifer's screams and cries. He moved to his mother's head and sat next to it. Ben picked up his mother's head and placed it in his lap. His mother's severed head oozed blood onto his pants. Ben's mouth hung open, and his dilated eyes fixedly stared down into his mother's face. He trembled uncontrollably. His face contorted. No tears came. Gary rushed toward Ben to try to get him moving. A bullet hit Gary's head from the back, exploding it on Ben and the immediate surroundings. Gary's body fell into Ben, knocking him down from his sitting position. Ben's mother's head rolled out of his lap onto the floor next to him. 2 more shots rang out and cement fragments sprayed all around Ben. Gary's lifeless body partially covered the middle and lower sections of Ben's body. Ben made no effort to get up, or even to move Gary's body off his own. Ben lay in shock, staring about without recognition of details in his immediate surroundings. Screams and shouts resounded as people made renewed efforts to take cover. Approaching sirens were now deafening the area around the federal courthouse. A woman bounded over the debris toward Jennifer, yelling, "Let's go! Let's go!" Jennifer gazed up at the woman without recognition. The woman grabbed Jennifer's upper arms and pulled her up. She pulled one of Jennifer's hands as they climbed over mounds of rubble toward Ben. "Let's go." The woman repeated her no-options command to Ben. Ben did not move nor change his catatonic gaze skyward. Jennifer looked down in horror, believing Ben was just one more fatality. She did not seem to possess any fear that she could at any moment be struck by another bullet and fall to join the other dead and dismembered. "Come!" The newcomer screamed as she shoved Gary's body to the side and pulled Ben to his feet. "If you have any electronic media, cell phones, watches, laptops, dump them here. I dumped mine as soon as I heard the explosions. We can't be carrying anything that can be used to trace us." Ben and Jennifer divested as directed. "We don't have stuff like that." Jennifer kept it simple. Ben's eyes were open, but they only stared out without apparent perception of the surroundings. The woman harshly slapped Ben's face. Ben just stood there, wavering in a stupor. The woman slapped Ben again. "Let's go." The woman yelled in Ben's face. Then she grabbed one hand each of Ben and Jennifer and began to pull them over the rubble. As the woman pulled, Ben and Jennifer stumbled amid destroyed structures and the bodies of people, including members of their own families, many dismembered, some crushed, none offering any sign of life. The woman yelled, "Look ahead! Watch where we are going. Do not look down," and roughly pulled Jennifer and Ben along. They faltered and stumbled, but they kept moving. The frantic commotion from recent yelling arrivals on the scene and from arriving emergency vehicle sirens was deafening. The woman was leading Ben and Jennifer further into, instead of out of, what remained of the federal judicial building. Physical activity helped bring Ben, at least partially, out of his stupor. The woman stopped Jennifer and Ben just inside an entry-exit door on the side of the judicial building that still stood. 3 thunderous explosions rocked the building's remains. Ben, Jennifer, and the woman hit the floor. The blows had come from another part of the building. They looked up. Dust. A Pavlovian precursor stimulus to something worse? Could their part of the building come tumbling down any moment? "Out of here," the woman hissed. Ben burst first for the door. Jennifer felt relieved to see Ben, apparently coming out of his crazed state. The door wouldn't open. It wouldn't budge. "Jammed," the woman yelled. "Get back." Ben was hardly clear of the door when the woman pulled a silencer-muzzled pistol and shot several times in a somewhat irregular circular pattern into the lower glass pane. The glass shattered, but the resulting hole wasn't big enough to crawl through, and its edges were jagged. The woman fired a few more times at the upper edges of the hole. Jagged edges continued to threaten, but now the hole was big enough to crab walk through it. "Careful," the woman ordered. Jennifer, then Ben, carefully knelt and crawled through the opening, taking care not to impale themselves on the glass. The woman followed. They could hear but did not see the source of more gunfire. It seemed to be coming from the other side of the building. "Come," the woman hissed. They did. "Don't look back," the woman added. They didn't. The woman seemed to know exactly where she was going. She didn't hesitate as she moved along, frequently scanning the area all around the ever-changing path they took. More than a block away from the courthouse, the woman led Ben and Jennifer into an underground parking area. "Faster," the woman hissed as she sprinted amid parked cars. The woman stopped abruptly at the passenger side of a sedan and unlocked the door. "Get in the back," the woman ordered, not in a gruff voice but in a voice that offered no negotiation. "One of you get down on the floor of the back seat area. The other person lies on the back seat. Then cover yourselves with all those things. Bags of chips, pretzels, toilet paper packages, and other lightweight goods partially covered a couple sleeping bags, pillows, clothes, and yucco, which gave the impression someone lived in the car. Don't worry about getting blood on anything." Ben and Jennifer had no energy left to argue. They complied. The woman drove the sedan out of the parking structure and headed off down a back street as she forged directives. "Move as little as possible. Do not come up to see where we are going, for any reason. Stay down. Stay covered. Breath deep and regularly. If you get car sick, you'll have to lie in your vomit. You can't get up. And we can't stop for you to vomit outside of the car." Jennifer and Ben heard her words interlaced with the bombarding images of the last few minutes that replayed in their thoughts. Noise, blood, and bodies dominated their respective mental streaming videos. So many bodies. It seemed probable that all members of Ben and Jennifer's families were amid the rubble, along with so many others.